If you can believe it, Bernie Sanders has come up with an idea that may be worse than all his other bad ideas.
I will be pushing for a moratorium on the construction of data centers that are powering this unregulated sprint to develop and deploy AI.
Hey everyone, I'm Lowry of National Review, and we shouldn't be surprised when a socialist comes up with a ruinously stupid idea that would make us all poor, harm the country's economic future and its national security. So here we are, Bernie Sanders playing to type. Now, data centers, of course, are necessary to the development of AI. There are all sorts of complaints about what are essentially big warehouses housing all the supercomputing power you need to develop AI. People don't like being around them, the local residents. They might be noisy. They guzzle a ton of energy. But these aren't the kind of complaints that Bernie Sanders is making here in his little video manifesto. He wants to stop AI itself, and it's worth looking at some of the reasons why. Of course, part of it for Bernie is that the wrong people are developing AI.
Who is aggressively pushing these technologies? Well, surprise, surprise. It happens to be the very wealthiest people on earth, people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Bill Gates, and other multi-billionaires.
So there you have it. The class enemies are developing this technology. This is so idiotic on so many levels. But one of them is that, yes, of course, very rich people and very big companies are making these sort of investments because they are the only ones that have the kind of scale to do it.
I think that these very, very rich men want even more wealth and even more power. And for a whole bunch of reasons, that is very dangerous.
Now here, he has a point. These are rich people who want to get richer. I don't think that's a bad thing. Would we really prefer that they all go to the island of Capri and live in a mansion, a life of ease, and don't do anything productive the rest of their lives? These incredibly talented people. Why would we want that? And yes, they want to get richer, but how do you do that? Well, you sell more things, or you develop new technology, or you do both. Again, these are all things that increase the net welfare of everyone around them and the rest of society, right? So yeah, they want to get rich, they want prestige, they like the idea of being first, they want their company to be bigger, they want their company to be more dominant. These aren't necessarily the most altruistic or high-minded motivations, but this is how human nature works. And if people didn't feel those sort of impulses and that sort of ambition, everyone would sit on the couch all day watching daytime TV, and our society would be much poorer and worse off and less happy because of it. So no, you don't need to depend on the selflessness of entrepreneurs to advance your society. Bernie Sanders is a socialist, so he's probably not even aware of this iconic Adam Smith quote making this point. It's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. Just so. Another problem with how Bernie views this is Elon Musk being very rich doesn't hurt anyone else, doesn't make anyone else less well off. This is not a zero-sum proposition, and I guarantee you, by the way, among these companies competing to develop the best AI, there'll be a winner or two that'll become incredibly dominant in this sector because of that. But it's also assured that one of these companies or these companies will help develop a technology that someone else will come along with a very bright idea, a new way of looking at things, and use to undermine their position in this business. In other words, they'll plant the seeds of their own destruction in a way we can't imagine and they can't imagine at the moment. This is how a vibrant free market economy works. But of course, Bernie is on the verge of despair.
What will AI and robotics mean economically for the working class of this country? Well, don't listen to me. Listen to the people who are developing those technologies. Elon Musk recently said, quote, AI and robots will replace all jobs. Working will be optional, end quote.
Now, Bernie contradicts himself here because earlier in his video, he says there's no way that the people developing this technology are thinking about the potential downside consequences, when in fact, some of the starkest warnings we've gotten about such consequences are from the people developing the technology. And Sanders quotes Elon Musk to this effect. I would just say, Elon Musk, great guy, many virtues, should be taken very seriously, but sometimes he exaggerates. Sometimes he exaggerates just a little bit. And that statement is probably an example, but Bernie Sanders is taking it deadly seriously.
If AI and robotics eliminate millions of jobs and create massive unemployment, how will people survive if they have no income?
That represents a huge misunderstanding, right? So if AI eliminates a ton of jobs or all jobs even, that's only happening because it's much better at doing those jobs and more productive. So the productivity of the economy would massively increase. You only get wealthier when productivity does increase. So it'd be a wealthier society. The government presumably would have more tax revenue and would be able to take care of all these people who weren't working. We already do a fair amount of that now. So I'm not saying this scenario is going to happen, but if we play along with the hypothetical, that's clearly what would happen. And I'm not sure why Bernie Sanders would be frightened of this prospect, because he's a huge supporter of the welfare state. Now, to this point, these kind of catastrophic scenarios have never come about. Doesn't mean that there aren't downsides to technology. They're downsides to everything, right? Social media has had negative consequences. The rise of the iPhone has negative consequences. But these sort of predictions about mass job loss because of technology, to this point, have never come true. Keynes, the great economist, warning in the 1930s, the rise of labor-saving devices were going to eliminate the need for labor. JFK worrying about the effects of automation in the 1960s. Look at a couple specific sectors of the economy. The rise of personal computers eliminated the need for a bunch of typists. These were jobs overwhelmingly held by women. Did that decimate the prospects of women in the workforce? No. Look at the rise of spreadsheets. Eliminates the need for a lot of bookkeepers and clerks. Did that eliminate accounting? No. Accounting got more sophisticated. In a dynamic economy that's getting more productive and richer, there's always flux in the kind of jobs you have. A majority of the current jobs we have in this country exist in occupational categories that didn't exist prior to 1940. So going after these data centers to try to end AI makes about as much sense as trying to end the mining of coal on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, which was fueled by coal. It makes as much sense as destroying new technology in the 19th century in the textile industry. Wait a minute. They did that. Those were the Luddites. On top of all this, you're not going to stop AI even if you try, because China is not going to stop researching AI. Neither are other countries. And if you deny U.S. companies data centers here in the U.S., they just go abroad and find data centers there and conduct the research that way. So this is a fantasy on top of everything else. Now, with regard to the practical question, are these things a drag on the electricity grid? Yeah, sure. But the way to deal with that is to unleash more American energy, build more energy infrastructure, and have a more rational energy policy. At the end of the day here, no matter how much Bernie Sanders calls himself a progressive when he's not calling himself a socialist, he is a reactionary socialist. He is attempting to sabotage the future based on his imagined vision of what the past once was. Don't let him do it. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.